Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. Mm, mm. Very glad to be with you. If you want to see your other fellow yogis, the other pages saying hi. Well, we hope you're all well, and we're going to start right away, settling in our attention, connecting with our bodies. So just letting the attention notice our sitting postures, or lying, kneeling. The Buddha described loving kindness as like a light, gentle rain. So you could maybe offer some loving kindness to yourself, your body, heart, mind, connecting with that we really do want to be peaceful and kind. Always finding those deeper wishes to be free from suffering, safe and protected from greed, hatred, and delusion. And sometimes it's not an intense shift, it's often a very, very light tenderness. And often connecting with the intention to care about any pain, appreciate any joy, and to be peaceful with whatever is happening, with that range of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Just being with things just as they are. So often letting the attention open to a wider field of awareness, where we understand that hearing is happening all the time. It's that shift to receiving textures, vibration directly, not just through the thought process. And part of finding peace is understanding this process, that we don't have to fix or manipulate, control what's appearing. But notice the sounds coming and going just as they are. And you really start to see, of course, the thought about a sound will happen, and you just notice thinking. You're including the thought that will come and go. And then just shifting back to hearing, receiving textures, vibration, including the silent. Shifting to our hands can be very interesting to notice a past memory of a visual image of our hands. Of course, it's a thought. It will come and go. Thoughts about our hands from the past. But then just, if you can, let the attention settle into the receiving vibrations, texture, temperature, smooth, soft, rough, hard, warm, cool, cold, hot. Numb, tight, light, vibration. Just pausing enough to just let whatever's going to appear emerge without words. And with the movement of our breath at the abdomen, really taking the time to allow a breath to begin to appear. Letting it be just as it is. Receiving. Textures, vibration. All the way to the end of the rising. And again, taking the time to let the falling movement appear. All the way to the end of the falling and disappearing just as it is. And of course, visual images, thoughts about the experience will come and go. That's thinking, no problem. You just bring the attention back when you notice that. If you can, to the direct experience. Never again the same breath. Always new. We start to notice that whatever appears moment by moment, sixth sense door awareness. There'll be a flow of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral appearances. Seeing if we can make space for that to be the truth of how things are. And of course, there'll be aversion at times to the unpleasant, attachment to the pleasant, confusion with the delusion. If it appears, we see if we can notice whatever appears, just like you would a sound or the breath. Including loving kindness, courage, anger, body sensation, sadness, happiness, joy, sorrow, appreciation, peace, just like clouds passing through the vast sky of heart, mind.
Thank you, Michelle. So we have some time this afternoon if anyone has any questions about your practice, about the instructions, about any of our other offerings or teachings, or just guidance along your path, or reflections about anything going on that we might be able to help with. The best way to let us know that you have a question is to raise your Zoom hand. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little button that says raise hand, and that's what happens. And we'll know you have a question. If that doesn't work, or you can't find that, you can type into the chat that you have a question to me, and I'll call on you. Or you can wave your actual hand around, and we'll see that and be able to give you a chance. Yeah, anything we might be able to help with. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Okay.
I don't think it might not be a question there, but I think I thought I had a lot of resistance and as a virgin type, but then I, there was something happened that I start noticing this sense of pushing and hardening happening, like not simultaneously, but it feels like, oh, there's resistance, there's hardening, resistant, hardening, resistant, hardening, and that often for me leads to like, oh, I don't deserve this, or like I'm worthiness of it. I didn't realize that there was kind of sense of self, or like the attachment or identification to just the thought of I don't deserve it so much. And I've been wondering why I can't care for that for a long time, or bring up metta or compassion, but I always thought I had to be drawn in sadness not to be able to offer compassion to myself. But I don't know. I don't know exactly. But something was so different this week. Just a sense of recognizing that, oh, I have a lot of identification around that thought, and that created a space which led for me to, oh, I actually could care for that for myself, with that little space I kind of um, found, and I just wanted to share that. I don't know.
Celebrate. Did you want to start, Michelle? I thought you were gonna. Hold on. I'm trying to put my pen. Well, I will. But I mean, I'm sure it sounds like Michelle has something more specific to
No,
say.
I
But
was
oh, okay.
no, I was just like so happy. I don't know. I just like a little bit of space is a lot of space in the moment. I mean, if we put time on things, a little bit of space starts to get smaller and smaller. But in the moment, a little bit of space, like you described it, like the second we recognize identification, even that is just a huge amount of liberation. So yeah, I'm really happy for you, just with these things that we have such deep karmic knot with. I guess that's the other thing I'll say, and then Jesse, you can add. But I think that when we get a little bit, little bit of space with a karmic knot, that's like, a huge accomplishment. Plus, you described it as a week, like this week, which is even more like a lot.
Yeah, I think I never thought identification as like hardness or constriction, like hardening. I often thought that was aversion, and I could be a virgin, but like in this case specifically, I didn't know what identification felt like until now. Um, yeah.
It's also a very cool like description of a way of it unfolding that I think is just really, I mean, it's very powerful. It's very helpful to hear, um, for everyone, for all of us, because it's another good example of how we have these like, methods and sort of formulas, and then how, and those are valuable and they have a lot of, they have their place. And then there's also something like so mysterious too, about how things unfold and where does opening happen. And so I think, often we will, when we're having in our practice, like in our formal practice, a hard time like being with something, right? Observing it just in sort of with mindfulness. A lot of times there is this sense of there being a karmic knot, a very deep, a kind of entanglement, emotional, physical, uh, mental, thought, sort of like just entanglement that's often like very foundational, about who we are in our lives, and often something that is part of our kind of basic structure from a long time, childhood and or longer, and so that sense of like being careful with it, and um, often there is often it's helpful for people to kind of course there's the whole like backing off and not trying to push too hard, and seeing how sometimes with the mindfulness we're trying to actually manipulate, and there's an agenda with it, and so sort of needing to kind of back off and knowing that we have to be careful, and then this encouragement towards metta or compassion. And that's based on a sense of like understanding that sometimes kindness or just caring can help us unbind a little bit from other agendas we might have with our attention. And that softening provides a sort of level of security and stability from which we can then observe things kind of more just as they are, right? With the going back into the mindfulness. And that's a very helpful approach, and a good, there's a reason that that's like a strategy. But also what you're describing is almost like a cool reverse of that, where over and again, because of our because like Michelle was saying, like time keeps unfolding, and it's hard to say what single strategy works or doesn't work, because it's like, we have to go through these things for months and years. But anyhow, in this moment, or this week, this sense that actually it was the mindfulness, right? The seeing of actually something more clearly, the seeing of something as subtle and as yet as powerful as identification, and getting a sense of texture and flavor and kind of just recognizing it as that, outside of other emotional qualities that are there, like that we might or assume are there. That the sense of like just that recognition and the seeing of that is what led to an opening. That opening led to like a softening of the heart, a capacity to care, an invitation, a sense of whatever, however you would describe it. That I just think there's something very powerful in that, and very important to recognize that it doesn't have to always be this other way. That there's many times for many of us that actually the insight side of things will help soften the heart enough to care, and um or that opening or that space or the recognition and the it's like another take on how powerful it is, the wisdom and love sides of the practice, and how they support each other and purify one another, and um work. And I think that not there's there's not necessarily need to get like super technical about it, but to appreciate something about that, that seeing something as, yeah, as powerful and as subtle as identification, and that recognizing that there's a fundamental kind of hardness to it or a tension there, um, that's actually what it's providing, right? It's providing stability. It's providing a sense of stability and structure and solidity in that which does not naturally provide it. And so that's painful. It's uncomfortable. It's unpleasant, and yet it's also, you can see how it's also functional to be creating that sense of tension, like surface tension, right? Where it's like, oh, this is me. Um, but to also have that sense of the unpleasantness of it, um, and whatever, if it was that or whatever else kind of opened to help you feel a capacity to care about this self, it's really beautiful, beautiful expression of that. And it's right, the perfect paradox, because you also see it's like you're seeing the self as a construction, as an experience, not necessarily as something real. And yet somehow by seeing it as a moment of surface tension, that paradoxically is what opens up you to be able to actually care about it. Is there something really wonderful about that? Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like identification's very hard to see. But then as Jesse's saying, to have it go from untangling that the identification is mine. This is mine, right? Mine. And to get to caring about yourself through seeing the house builder, that's what the Buddha's great description, house builder, I see you no more. That's when we see identification. And then, of course, how could we possibly not care about ourselves? It's through wisdom. Yeah, the wisdom side. It's great.
I think I just reversed it. Like I was wondering why I can't care while I can care about other things or other people, other beings. And yeah, as long as I can care. Oh, there's like recognition and identification. And when I can't, oh, okay. Like there's hardening. Yeah. So it was, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've been going at it for a long time, but it, it was,
You have.
yeah. It was like, oh, cool.
It's good to laugh about it.
celebrate Michelle.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. Thanks, Kate. Hi, son. Let's
Hi,
see.
son.
Can we unmute? Oh, here. Hold on. There we go.
Yeah, I have a question about karma. Like the guy who just killed, definitely he deserved it. I feel sorry for his family, but I feel he deserved it because he's for for violence. So isn't that the fruit of what he promotes for?
I didn't hear that last bit. It's a fruit of what?
Of what he promoted,
He has been
Ah,
promoted.
right.
I mean, I think, I think deserve is always it's such a loaded word, so, and I don't know, I think it'd be interesting to get like a Pali scholar who really knows, like really knows sort of how to translate some of the different words, that are used. But I think certainly there is the understanding that actions motivated in greed, hatred, and delusion will perpetuate those things. We will be the inheritors of those, And so whether that is like I think the question of like whether it's someone is like dishing it out like a god, saying, well, you deserve this because that, or if it's just sort of like the mechanics of action, the mechanics of the universe, that these things do tend to perpetuate them. And I think that of course we see that in ourselves and in society, that when any of us act out of those things, it tends to perpetuate them either internally or externally. But then of course you have plenty of people who are the victims of violence who we might say are, committed to nonviolence, and who are, not perpetuating in their lives. And so it's very hard to, like the Buddha said, to understand the mechanisms of karma in detail. It's considered an unfathomable thing. So I think it's all of it, all sides of this type of thing does feel like an encouragement to be careful, with what's motivating our actions. Michelle, what do you think?
Just I feel like ever since I was a little kid, I'm very sensitive or careful about a sense of karma being punishment and blame. Because I feel like it's a misunderstanding of karma, although I wouldn't have been able to use those words when I was a kid. But I grew up with a lot of people acting out, one might say, that way. And I grew up in the Catholic Church where there was a sense of pretty much everybody was going to hell that I knew. And as a little kid, that was they were going to hell as punishment for their sins. And I really grappled with it, even when I was 5 or 6. I just, it was such, I think it was a suffering that ends suffering, but it was extremely painful. So when I did enter the world of Buddhist practice, I just smell the smell of, in I think a misinterpretation of karma, although you could find it in the text. So I don't necessarily feel like it's expressed verbally as well as I would hope it could be someday, although we're trying. I want to say a few more words, but I'm trying to find them. For us to be able to, from the outside of anybody, to kind of assume that kind of judgment is not really taking in what I think Jesse just said, what the Buddha said, that karma is imponderable. It's one of the imponderables. But the encouragement is ehi passiko, the Buddha. See for yourself, keep seeing for yourself. In our world, just like the behavior, and how things happen. But to look at it in even a lifetime, it's not enough. It's like we can have something happen to us in the present that comes from 200 lifetimes ago. It can come from being a frog or a deva, or it's like it's our perspective is so limited that when the Buddha says imponderable, it's not like something like light that he's saying. He's like imponderable means imponderable. And I think that we tend to go up in our head and try to ponder it, because when things are so painful, we want to establish blame for something that we might have done 10 years ago, or somebody did or said 2 minutes ago. Oh, you might hear that I'm a bit passionate about this, but I am. I feel like I see so many people on this planet suffering from punishment and blame and scapegoating. And I think that when our ideas about something like this that aren't deeply rooted in understanding the imponderability, that we actually can't live out our karma well. So like we're on this planet together. There's a collective karma. We're living out this karma all together. That's we could try to figure out, well, what what did we all do to deserve this, right? But I just think it's a complete misunderstanding of karma. It's like the idea is that you start to get, all we can do is show up in the present and face what's happening, face it relentlessly and carefully and with so much metta and so much wisdom. It's like That's really hard to do.
But like even in the negative karma, but like I can see, like I used to say, oh, some people, they just have like a natural authority.
A natural
Some of my
what?
friend, a natural like authority, like people just respect them naturally. Like my sister, my middle sister, and Queen too. Like, people just feel a natural respect for what they say. I mean, like, it's like for me, like, I think like people just whatever they do or their words, people respect them.
Hmm.
And as first I felt like they have like a natural authority or personality that command respect, but I feel like it's because they have been doing what they need to do. They have a big sense of responsibility. That's why I respect them.
Hmm.
It's not like a natural, but it's
Oh,
the fruit of the actions.
Mhm.
right. And the Buddha would say, for this lifetime.
I see.
But that doesn't mean they're fully liberated. That means that in this lifetime, yeah, that's the karma. But the Buddha didn't limit the crux of the crux of our suffering. He didn't limit it to that kind of way of seeing the world. He really emphasized us all doing what we can to end suffering. So you can have a terrible personality and become fully enlightened.
We don't recommend it though. So.
No, but I really think it's very important to remember that what you see on the outside, of course, it's of course we like somebody who's like gracious and kind, and those are good qualities to have. But that doesn't mean that that person has ended greed, hatred, and delusion. So I'm challenging you a bit here, Sun. I know you, and it's like, of course, it's really nice to have an emotional intelligence and to be worthy of respect in that way. But we have to be careful that that could be a ripening of karma from 30 lifetimes ago. So that does not protect that being in the future, because there can be a ripening of karma from 50 years ago that would lead to a lifetime that didn't have that. I'm really taking the big picture, folks, here because I have to. It's my job. Understanding karma is so difficult, and it would what's playing out now is extraordinary if you take it from the perspective of everybody's karma ripening at this point in time on the planet, right? It's like, wow. It's purification central. And oh boy, we're here to try to get us stronger and stronger to get liberated with it. Yeah. So I think your question's really important. I'm not, obviously, I'm taking it very seriously. So in other words, what the if you look at these chants that we chant, what is worthy of respect in ourselves and others is this motivation to get out of, liberate the world from our own and others' greed, hatred, and delusion. That's worthy of respect. And it's really hard. That's why it's worthy of such respect. You all know this. You sit with your mind for 1 hour, and it's like, I know, wow, yeah. But you can step out of that and jump back into your personality, and it might not even be visible. Renee, I think Jesse might have some way to.
Yeah, I'm well. I mean, I think some part of, I mean, in some ways you brought up like a different aspect of it, but that I do want to address. I mean, I think the second part of what you brought up is very powerful and confusing, and it's just a good thing to also be careful about. There are people who have, in whatever context they're in, or in this world, or they have a natural confidence or a natural way to talk that feels like people respect them and listen to them and follow them or take them seriously. And I just think that's such a mixed bag for all of humanity, that there's things about that are, it's like we can be so inspired by some people. And then on the other hand, charisma or people who are good at being manipulative or who just have something that, like you're pointing to, it's like they have something that it draws people to them and that is very compelling, and yet might be very sinister ultimately. Like what they really, it might not be a sign of anything actually good. Is a very weird, I mean, that's a very strange thing about the world we live in and human. And so, I mean, I always feel like actually the monastic in our tradition are such good examples of that. You look at the different, well, even just to say like monks, right? Of like how different a personality someone like Sayadaji Pandita had compared to maybe Uthusana, right? Or people who you may like respect these different monastics, but they're very different personalities, and that actually doesn't go away, But also it's still this world where it's the male voices are still going to get raised above the women monastics, right? Or the quieter people who we may never hear from. We talk about the happy Sayadaw. He was never someone famous. He was just a quiet person that was like a beautiful monk and a beautiful practitioner, and maybe didn't have some of these qualities. And so I think that sense of like where, it's an interesting question about the world. It's a good thing to be skeptical of people's charisma in general, and to be very careful about like, what is it that we feel so enchanted with sometimes with people. And then also I think with our own selves, and like, where do we fit in? There might be some places where we feel much more adept at bringing our gifts, and other places that we're not as secure around it. And I think this time, where opinions seem to matter a lot, everyone's views and everyone's, how well you say something or how well you make your argument, that sense of like, do people agree with you? Do a lot of people, how many likes do you get? Or those, it's like a very weird way that we're all measuring something important, I think, also about what you're saying. I don't know. And I do feel it's something to be very careful. It's all it, and it has to do with the, the praise and blame and status and disgrace, right? That whole dynamic of how do we feel about ourselves. I think we can rationalize violence, we can rationalize, all kinds of things, but I do feel like that ultimately this sense of like what is cultivating goodness, what is cultivating the ending of suffering, what is cultivating the ending of hatred and enmity, and the creation of a more protective world. Actually, I'm going to share something. This is a little bit, it's related to this all, but I'm preparing for my mom's memorial service in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go back to Massachusetts, and I found this little clip that I recorded of her. She had made a cookbook the last year of her life. She spent like a ton of time making this cookbook, and so we had a conversation on that I recorded so that I could use as sort of like to kind of create her introduction. But I thought, yeah, let me see. I'm going to share this. It's 1 minute, so not a big time commitment. Hold on a second. There's sound. Okay. I think you should be able to hear this.
How many good memories I have around our friends and family getting together, either at my house or their houses, or even in other places, and just about how it builds a sense of community, sharing food together and recipes and socializing. Because, we weren't going to church, and that was a community for a lot of people. You need places where people can talk and share stories and feel at home. If there's not church, you don't belong to any religious organization. You have to figure out other ways to do it. Everyone's searching for their people. And if you think about organizing, union organizing, community organizing, I realized early on that if you don't build a community for those people that you're working with, you're not going to be successful. I've never been a very articulate spokesperson. I'm shy. I'm not one to give speeches, and but that's the one thing I feel like I can do. I can make a few potluck items and invite people to a get together.
And I do, I really feel like that's something like my mom taught me a lot about, that like we can be concerned and should be concerned about the world and all of its like big mechanisms, and do what we can to be a force for change. And all of us are going to find like a different way towards that, and she had many different ways in her life that she tried to do things, but I think came to a place where realizing like she wasn't going to be that. She wasn't going to be in the head of anything. She wasn't going to be out there giving speeches and mobile, but like she realized like that she did have a role to play in community and in friendships and in cooking and bringing people together. That actually is really fundamental to whatever work we're doing or whatever world we're trying to create, So I do think there is something about both parts of your question, son, in that sense of like, we can have questions, we can, of course, we have parts of ourselves that eh, until we're fully enlightened, or at least until we're, anagami, third stages, it's like, there's going to be some aversion, and there's likely going to be some sense of like having enemies, right? And the parts of ourselves that are have ill will, you know, wish harm on others, or feel gratified, you know, when others have harm. And that is, on one hand, it's like we have to really take that to heart, of like that is a human experience, that is something very deep in us, beyond human. I mean, this is like a, a lot about evolution and how existence is. Aversion is a very powerful force, you know, and that sense of, at the very least, it should help us realize we might not be so different from our enemies. The people we think of as our enemies, the people we judge, the people we think we might be morally superior towards. It's like, as long as we have that in us, that there's going to be that karmic backfiring, you know, where it's like any judgment we put out there is going to, we know we're judging some part of ourselves as well, you know. Maybe the ideology is different, maybe the words are different, maybe the analysis is different, but to take responsibility of that, and not as a reason to feel bad about ourselves, but as a reason to be careful about judging, a reason to be careful about our actions, and hopefully something to inspire us to really try to understand better, you know, and then observe through our own relationships and our own actions and what we're doing, of like what really does create the conditions and the outcomes that we long for and long for in the world, you know. So it's a really important question, Son. Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up.
On another note, in regard to karma, when one of the great teachers, Tangpo Sayadaw, came to Boston from Burma, he's the one that it was said he had spent 33 years in a cave and didn't lay down for 33 years. And he was a powerful being, but of course, quiet, very quiet. After he taught a retreat, we brought him to the aquarium in Boston. And we were all kind of around him so that he could be, you know, it was crowded and he could kind of walk along and look at and see these beings. And he got to this electric eel, and he was just standing there looking at it. You know, it was just doing this electric thing, you know, just kind of light, you know, like lightning, you know. And he looked at me and he said, "Strange karma." And I think I feel like I do that with everything and everybody. You know, it's like strange karma. Yeah. That's strange karma, right? To be an electric eel, to be a human being now, you know, we gotta have some perspective.
Thanks, Son. Harry. Oh, you're muted there. Hold on. There
I
we
get
go.
what Michelle is saying about karma in the big picture. And I also get that judging is a kind of a fool's errand. But maybe I'll be a fool here. In the small snapshot of things, if I, for instance, have a dog and I beat that dog, and one day that dog bites me, not talking about the dog's big karma over generations or my karma that led to that moment, but that cause and effect that seems to happen in that microcosm might be something to look at. And with Kirk or with other people, what they were espousing in that small view of things did seem to have perhaps a cause and effect aspect to it. it's karma is overstating what that would be, but you know, if you're nice, or if you're nice to people like your mother was, people will be nice to her. There's a cause and effect there that goes far. I mean, if you look at the karma, who knows why your mother was nice and people liked her, all of that. I mean, sounds like a wonderful person, but am I making any sense of that small picture, that snapshot? But it's very dangerous to say you're suffering because of this or that is very dangerous. And like the Bible says, judge not lest you be judged. And I think that's very wise words, but it's hard not to wonder, you know, who knows what, yeah, anyway, I think that's
I think the word wonder is a really good word. You know, it's like we can certainly, it's all part of the practice is really to actually understand. Did something happen?
momentarily. I think you're back. Yeah.
Okay. Understand karma. That was karma. Everything karma. That what we're meant to do is look at our motivation and see that when we make a decision out of fear, right, versus loving kindness, it will have an effect, right? That's the whole practice of really starting to understand cause and effect. But I think that what starts to get very confusing is that when we try to control the results of our motivation. So if we care very deeply about something and we work hard to take care of it and we don't.
It has to do with some kind of whatever the speaker situation is at Harry's.
White House?
Yeah. It's somehow we're hearing our own voices, and it's okay.
I'll
Maybe
mute,
I'm just gonna, I'll mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll mute myself.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that it all boils down to motivation, and the whole practice is one of seeing over and over again that when we're motivated out of kindness, we're meant to look at the result of that, but we have to be careful of. We might make an action out of kindness, but 3 seconds later, we're attached to the result of the action. This is why karma is so complicated and why it's so almost crazy to try to judge others, because you can barely get a handle of your own. But yes, there's a small picture where we have a neighbor that is really harming a lot of his animals. And it's causing such a havoc in our neighborhood that there's a number of people taking a lot of action to try to stop it, right? Like it's not that we're not saying that we don't hold people accountable for their actions. That's where it all gets paradoxical, or ourselves. But to say anyone would deserve something because of something is really getting into ignorant territory. That's all. Yeah.
Okay, I see that. I see that. It's dangerous. You could say it might be a factor, but who the heck knows what's really causing what, you know?
But
It's
you
better.
used a word, you used a word that's really important. Wonder. Like, I really wonder what is going on with this neighbor. I mean, clearly he's really disturbed, right? I mean, it's like, but actually I have no idea, but it has to be stopped.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you don't take action or try to promote loving kindness and compassion, etc. But to think you have it figured out is a fool's errand. Yeah. Yeah.
It's it would like with any of this stuff, it's the reminder to keep looking at ourselves and our own motivation, and to our best to care about harm and protect beings being harmed. I mean, that is our task, but it's not like we can do it perfectly or understand it perfectly. You know, I can see Jesse's thinking about something, but yeah, it's like to be able to have unconditional love and unconditional peace, but hold ourselves and others accountable when we need to. It's hard.
I think paradox is a good word, and I keep coming back to that. Judge not, lest we be judged, because that's exact. It's yeah. Anyway,
I think
yeah.
I want to be careful about saying like, oh, it's wrong to think to ever try to understand what impacts things happen. I don't want to go, I don't want to overstate. You know, the Buddha said it's unfathomable the workings of karma in detail, right? But it doesn't mean you can't generally basically say like, yes, there are these patterns unfolding and something happens and it's not like some big mystery as to like it's some of the forces that are the result in certain outcomes, you know. So I don't think we have to only wonder and just be like, we don't know about why anything happens, or we don't know why things are. It's like, well, no, actually we do know some things. We're very clear on like this policy is in place and it creates this outcomes. And so it's like, I don't think we need to just be committed to just like, we don't know, you know. But I think it's a sense of care.
I don't think that's what's being said, but I
Right.
think
I
it's
just
good
think it's
to
important to
clarify.
be careful. Yeah, to
Right,
clarify that.
right.
It's like we're not
Yeah.
just here to just be wondering all the time.
No,
It's like that there
but
is, yeah, that we can have some sense of, yes, whether you call it karma, whether you call it, you know, you understand some of the forces at play that lead to certain outcomes, for sure. I think where we have to be careful is around assuming a sort of, yeah, like a moral certainty about the results of actions in detail. I think we have to be careful about assuming we're going to understand or be able to control the outcomes of our actions no matter what's motivating them. And I think that's part of what Michelle is saying. It's like there is a value, an important understanding that certain motivating forces in our actions are going to tend to create certain outcomes, right? But that doesn't mean that if we only have wholesome, loving motivation, that's going to necessarily make the outcome we want to have happen either, right? So it's also important to recognize that, like, just because you're committing to a moral path or committing to nonviolence or committing to whatever, that doesn't mean that's actually going to have the outcome that you desire, or that you're not going to get killed for that. Obviously, we know that, right? So it's like to not confuse the sense of like the value of it is not in the certainty about the details of the outcome, because the details are unknowable. But there is something that we can have confidence in terms of recognizing the value and the implications and what it's cultivating internally or in our immediate surroundings of actions based on different motivations, you know. So it's like I think it's just important to clarify that this doesn't mean that like we don't have ways of understanding or fathoming or analyzing the world that we live in, you know. And just like both of you said, yes, of course, it doesn't mean that we don't act, you know, or that we don't get involved. I'm not to say that we have to either, but I think that it's not like a prohibition, you know. But when we do act and get involved, I think it brings out, you know, another layer of questions as to like efficacy and moral alignment and community, and, you know, how do you, you know, most acting as groups or collectives versus as individuals, and the complexities of that, you know. So yeah, really important. Thanks, Harry.
We can get assassinated for all kinds of things, and not just it can be somebody really doing good stuff or really hard bad stuff. Like it's like, but nowadays anybody can get killed, so we have to be careful about that. Yeah. Mm. I want to bring up one more thing because I like to, you know, we quote Sri Nisargadatta a lot, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj from the book I Am That. And I had never heard him speak, and, you know, he died. I kept reading him, but somebody played a video of him, and he listening to him was like listening at somebody screaming. It was like, it was so shocking to me. Like I had this whole idea of what he was like, and then it was just like, wow, it was just like so unpleasant. It was like he was yelling, and it was so helpful for me. Like it was such a it broke some bubble about how we have this idea of somebody who might be very free and awake, and that was his personality.
Maybe we'll try that next week.
Yeah. No, yeah, but beautiful Dhamma just like flowed out of him a lot mostly, and just to hear it like that was just like, wow, that is really shocking, but great for me individually to wake up and smell the coffee. Not that Jesse and I were next week, we promise we're not going to be screaming. Oh, Quinn, are you trying to wave or yeah.
Yes, I would like to say something about the clip that Jesse just showed. I felt very moved. And your mother reminded me of this saint, this Catholic saint, Saint Teresa of Lisieux of France, that she was so much dedicated and devoted to doing the work of God. But her aspiration is to not be somebody big and charismatic and shining and trying to impress anybody, but her vow was to be modest and to be humble and to keep doing the good work of God, of Jesus. And that your mother is doing so much good by just like organizing community potluck. And I'm just so touched by that, Jesse. So thank you.
Thank you, Quinn. Yeah, I know. It's funny. There is something, I have to do a longer thing of her. You know, she grew up in a not religious family, but she did, long story short, her stepmother was a Mennonite when her mom died quite young. And so she did start having these experiences at this Mennonite church in Ohio where there was these potlucks, and it got her going on this whole, and then her life got very kind of political and organizing and all these things. But some of her, then kind of a lot of her, she did a lot of work with like the Farm Workers Union and different kinds of organizing. And then, but it was in Massachusetts that she befriended these small group of Catholic nuns, the Sisters of St. Joseph, who are just like kind of what you're describing, just very beautiful, dedicated, kind of, kind, serious, quiet, humble women who are just, that they ran the nursery school that I went to, and they were a big influence on my life too. But I think there's something about that quality that I think really called her. She
Yes.
really wanted to be a nun. She saw that there's some Julie Andrews movie where she was a nun, I guess, right? Like the the singing nun, maybe. Anyway, I think she wanted to. She really wanted to be a nun, I think, as a young woman. So she was on the edges of that. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Quinn. No, it was. I mean, especially after last week, I know where I was talking about some more of the harder things with her. It's like, yeah, there was, of course, yeah, so much beautiful, beautiful things about her life and things that she inspired me. So yeah, thanks for that reflection. Yeah. All
Thanks
right, everyone.
Thank you for your questions. They were really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And your practice.
Take care, everyone. See you next week.